Hi all, welcome to Beanie Composter. You wouldn't believe it's actually the 27th of October today. The sun is beaming on my face and it's actually quite warm. And if you look at our plants here, we've got a rose here that, to be honest, it struggled all through the summertime, but as we're approaching late autumn winter, it's got two new buds and it's really starting to pick up. So the plants are clearly struggling with the temperature and the climate, but one thing is for sure, as the clocks have gone back, daylight hours are getting shorter, and it's starting to get a bit colder, or it should do. And for us, we've got loads and loads of waste in the garden. Mrs. B has almost created a nursery. We'll pan round and show you that. But for some of you, you might not have a lot of waste to go into your hot bin, and I thought it's quite a good time of the year, just before we get into the depths of winter, to give you winter options with your hot bin. So today's video is just going to be about options for your hot bin during the winter if you don't know what to do with it. Now, our larger hot bin here has been working pretty well for the last few 3-4 months, and well, since I actually emptied it, it's been working really well. But today I've come and looked at it and I've noticed, I gave it a feed yesterday, I've noticed that the actual temperature is just about on 40. So have a look and how full we are. Now, I know from experience that if I keep feeding that, it's not going to really get up in temperature, because it needs some emptying out the bottom, and it's probably a bit compacted at the bottom, which means we're not going to get the airflow going through it. So I've said this many a times, keeping a hot bin going throughout winter isn't the easiest thing in the world. You will get a period where it will go cold, so don't get disheartened with that. It may take you a couple of weeks, it may take you longer to get it back up to hot composting, but we've got plenty of videos on the channel that will give you advice and tips on how to keep things hot, and even if it does go cold, how to get it back hot composting again. For me, I'm going to try and empty this and keep it going all through the year, because we've got the waste. It's only close to the house and it gives me an opportunity to get out in the garden and use it. If you're like me and you want to keep your hot bin hot composting all through the winter, I think now is a really good time to give your hot bin a good service, even if it is hot composting really well at the moment. I think end of October, while we still got a little bit of warmth in the air, is always a good time that you could take compost out and give your hot bin a good sort of almost service. So take the base plate off, give that a good clean, just so you know that everything is ready for the winter, and if it does go cold, you know that it isn't through the fact that the base plate is all blocked or things are not working right, because you haven't sort of assessed that situation. So I would definitely, if you haven't done it in the summer, definitely give it a good service and just literally take things apart and make sure it's all nice and clean and almost back to how it was brand new. And before you start up your hot bin and put the waste in, maybe put a few little twigs in the bottom just to help that airflow, so that it just see you through the winter period, when probably it is the hardest time, December, January, to keep your hot bin hot. Feeding the hot bin every other day with like a little feed rather than one big feed once a week helps a lot. And when you add that feed, make sure you add extra paper and cardboard so the hot bin doesn't go really damp and moist, and also add plenty of bulking agent, more than you would in the summer, just to keep that airflow going through it. Now, with the waste, you might have stuff stored in the shed or something which is old like this, so make sure you mix that in with fresh waste, a bit like this. Bloody hell, you didn't put stinging nettles in there, did you? Because my fingers are like starting to tingle. So yeah, don't make that mistake. Also, make sure your waste is as dry as possible. Like in the mornings when you've got a lot of dew on the plants, you don't want that moisture going into the hot bin, because in the winter time it's not easy to sort of rectify the bin if it does go anaerobic, so just be aware of that. Another thing that will help you out during winter is the Kickstart bottle. I know I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it does come in handy now and again if you do find your hot bin has got cold and you just need to add a little bit of extra heat into your hot bin. So don't be afraid to give it a go, trial it out and just see if that does work. I think there are times when you do need to use it, and it's worth a try. I've also shown in a small video that putting waste into a microwave and heating it up, it also adds in some heat into your waste, so you could give that a go if you are finding that your hot bin is going cold. So I mentioned earlier about with your hot bin, taking the compost out, giving it a good service, just checking, all the air flow is nice and clear. Now, if you are going to do that and your hot bin is, say, in an awkward place for you to get to during the winter time, then maybe you might want to think of moving your hot bin closer to the house, or more accessible place for you to get to, where if you get snow on the path or ice on the path, you're not going to slip and it's not going to put you off from going to the hot bin. So you could actually move your hot bin. Once they're emptied, they're nice and light and easily movable, so you could move it to a patio that's closer to the house, and just so it's more accessible for you to get to. Now, if you do go for that option, all I would say is maybe think about putting your hot bin into a tray, something like this, just so you don't have all the leachate going over your patio and staining it throughout the winter, because come spring and when you go to clean your patio, it's going to be a real nightmare. So if you're going to go for that option, make sure you do put your hot bin into a tray. Another option is putting your hot bin undercover. Now, we've done a video on this and there's a lot of benefits from putting it into a greenhouse or a polytunnel, and as I said in that video, you're not, when you're actually feeding your hot bin and assessing it, you're not in the outside element, so you're undercover, you're not going to get wet if it's raining, and I think it just gives you a bit more time to spend with your hot bin, check it's working well. It wouldn't put you off from, standing in a really cold garden. So that's another option. If you have got a smaller greenhouse, or perhaps not a polytunnel, but if you are keeping your hot bin hot, the steam that's coming out of it may just help to ease off the frost from that greenhouse and protect some of your plants. So that's an option to look at. I would say bring it into, say, like we've got a lean-to conservatory or a garage. Bringing it into somewhere like that is, you've got to be aware that, number one, put it in a tray again, because if the leachate leaks, it's going to be a nightmare. But also, the steam that comes out your hot bin will create condensation within that room. So if you've got stuff that could get damaged, then maybe that's not the best option. But think about it, and if you do have a little greenhouse or something, as I say, the hot bin's so light once you empty it, it makes sense to move it somewhere where it's going to be easier to look after.
Yeah, but again, if you have Mark II, you don't need to worry about the leachate
No,
coming
the
out.
Mark II can still leak from the sides and that, and even like if it gets too full, like the leachate can come over the grill bit. So yeah, it doesn't mean if you've got a Mark II that it's going to be leachate free, no stains and that. You're still going to get that.
Okay. But I was thinking, you said about the moisture coming out of it. Like, it's not like a steam train, is it?
No, but there's still quite a bit of steam. That's creating steam.
It's only when you lift it up.
No,
I
but the
mean, lift the
steam is
cover.
still coming out of that vent, out of the top. So you're
Is
still,
it?
yeah, you're still going to have a lot of steam that you don't notice that's going to go into the room.
Oh.
But if you're thinking about not using your hot bin over winter, what options have you got? If you want to just totally leave your hot bin throughout the winter, then you could almost turn it into a wormery. Now the hot bin is well insulated, as you probably know, and I don't know how, but I always seem to get worms into the hot bin. So if you want to leave it over the whole of the winter without even feeding it, or you just want to feed it, then you can just let it go cold and leave it just like a normal compost bin in the garden, where you're just putting stuff into it occasionally. And if it drops below 40 degrees, which it probably will if you're not attending it that often, then just definitely make sure you're not putting any cooked food, any raw meats, fish, anything like that, perennial plants. Just maybe put kitchen scraps such as, like, potato peelings, carrot peelings, fruit peelings. And if you are lucky enough that it's dry and you can cut the grass, or you do a few bush trimmings, things like that, then you can put them in. But I wouldn't go putting perennial weeds and things like that that are not going to actually break down and get destroyed properly. So just be aware of that. But you can still use your hot bin throughout the winter if you're just going to occasionally put a feed in now and again. What I will say is, when you do feed it, still add the cardboard and paper, or one of either, and also add bulking agent as well, because that'll help keep the airflow in there and stop it from going anaerobic. Now, if it does go anaerobic and you find it smelling putrid, or you've got a lot of moisture content in there, then I would say you want to assess that before you start putting more stuff in there. So maybe put more paper in there, more bulking agent, and don't put wet stuff in there. So as I say, you're going to keep your hot bin like a cold hot bin, but because of the insulation, it's actually probably going to have a bit more temperature than it would in your Dalek composter. So definitely worth still using it, even if you can't keep the temperatures up to hot composting temperatures, which is over 40 degrees. One way to know if you've got worms in your hot bin is just to lift it up, and if you see worms around the sides, then you know there's definitely worms in your hot bin. I was asked, do worms enter through the mesh plate? Now, I don't believe they do. I think the worms just get introduced when you put weeds with soil on and stuff like that. I think the eggs and baby worms get introduced that way. But if I open the hatch door, we'll see how many worms are in here. So, as I'm saying, we could leave that over the whole of the winter and just turn that into almost like a wormery. I know it's not a real wormery, but it's still going to give you, the worms are going to still break down the compost, and come spring you could take this all out, put it into either a Dalek, a bag, and just let it carry on rotting down, and then give your hot bin a nice clean out and just restart it in the springtime, ready to compost all throughout the summer. Okay, we've just come to my mum's to show you the Hotbin Mini with all the worms in, and I've noticed there's been a bit of fox damage. Well, not just a bit, quite a bit. We've got some guy who's sledgehammering something and making loads of noise. Mrs. B's getting a bit peed off, so I think in a minute she's going to just pop over the hedge, grab that sledgehammer and whack it right over his head. But anyway, yeah, teeth marks, cam strap's been ripped, and not ideal, but it did sort of make me think that if you were gonna completely empty your hot bin, or just leave it over winter unattended, then maybe try to give it some sort of protection, or make sure you go and see it, and it isn't getting damaged, because if they sort of rip this completely off and then took the door off, then the door would be like going down the garden ripped into shreds. So that's just another thing to be mindful of over winter time, that you can keep an eye on your hot bin and prevent any damage like that from happening. If you are getting a new hot bin and it is winter time, then you can still start it up. It's not an issue. You just need to obviously make sure you've got enough waste, and it may not start up as quick as in the summertime, so just be patient. But if you follow like the hints and tips that we give on the channel, then during winter you still will be able to get your hot bin hot composting. So don't be put off about getting a hot bin during the winter time and giving it a go. As I said at the very beginning, there's always a stage where the hot bin will go cold for me at some stage over winter, so don't be disheartened. Be patient, follow some of our videos, and I'm sure you'll be happy composting and enjoying in no time. So it's a goodbye from me, and Mrs. B should have done all the editing this time. She was doing one pot every minute in the last video. I was watching Judge Trump pot one pot every 15-20 seconds on his snooker match. So everyone's a winner, and by the way, the car did pass the MOT, so happy composting, happy motoring, and enjoy.